And he
At
said,
the bar.
At the bar. And he was asking. It got around to the fact that Bev was a minister, and he was very interested in the fact that Bev's a minister, and they got to talking about some philosophical type questions that Peter had, and then as a result of that, Peter inquired when Bev would be back. When she might, be back at Elizabeth, so maybe he could have a chance to talk with her again. So they said Thursdays at 11:45 is when you can find Bev here. So he came, and we had a group of about 6 people that day having lunch, and Peter showed up. And we pulled a chair up and welcomed Peter to come on in and join our group, and we had various ages and just a very diverse group of folks that day. And I think Peter felt very comfortable and was able to, just talk about, what the church meant to us, and we were able to share some things about our church. And he is a former tennis pro and with some injuries, so I think he's, maybe searching a little bit at this point. And I think he found, that he could relate to all of us in the group, and it started with Bev.
Now, I want to just kind of highlight a couple things in that video. One is that this pastor, she is pretty much representative of most pastors across the connection. She's actually quite introverted. It didn't keep her from being out and interacting. And notice that it was one-on-one interactions, where most pastors really do very well is in those settings. Notice she was in a neutral setting. And notice that she actually had staff meetings at that particular restaurant. She was well known in that case. So when pastors tell me, well, I can't do that, I can only tell you, talk to Bev, because she has been doing it for a long time now, and it's just one at a time. Remember, don't despise the day of small things. Now, you and I'm just really anxious and jealous for you, pastors, to kind of reconnect with the passion that you have of interacting with other people and different people and beginning to have regular interaction with them, and they begin to see you, whether they attend your church or not, they begin to see you as a person of grace and mercy, a person of refuge even, as you begin to see that. So you've got to begin to fish. You've got to get into ponds. So I want you to, if you can imagine, if I had a piece of paper up here and I drew I drew the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Miami, and just think of all those fishing holes that you have, all right? And each one of those is a different fishing hole. You're not going to catch the same fish in every hole, so you have to think through this. And pastors, you've got to think through, the appropriateness and where you're going to be. But these are all, I can give you a number of different things that are happening. Now, again, when we talk about networking, there's certain things are even gender appropriate. I've got male church planters that can go to bars and make all kinds of contacts. And female church planters, they go and they get misinterpreted. So, ladies, I'm not insensitive or unaware of that when I talk about networking, there's some that are even gender appropriate. So put all that through your filter and figure it out. I also know that one of the best places to go for some of the female pastors that I've coached is they go to these Mary Kay. They show up at the Mary Kay meetings whether they buy the Mary Kay or not. And they end up recruiting half the people to be greeters for their church. I'll tell you, if you're ever depressed, just go to a Mary Kay meeting. Those ladies they're like so positive, If I'm having a bad day, I go to a Mary Kay meeting, or I walk in a Walmart where the greeter always says, "Hi, how are you today?" Anyway. Now, friends, that's a joke. If you don't laugh at my jokes, some of you are looking at me like, huh? Come on, let's get a grip out there. Okay, first thing, I want to introduce you to the new normal. Pastors, I know you have an office at your church, and I know you spend a lot of money to put your name on it and everything else. You're going to, please donate your office to the United Methodist Women chapter in your church and get an office out in the community. Get out into the community, the new normal. In fact, most of the business people in your church don't have an office. They're out in the community. In my particular case, there were 5 Starbucks. When I lived in Denver, last church I started was in Denver. There were 5 Starbucks within a 2-mile radius of my house. And whenever I had people from the church or new people I was interacting with, I said, I'll meet you at this Starbucks. And we met. And I had people share with me some of the deepest, darkest secrets of their lives in a Starbucks coffee shop. And if things got too emotional, we walked outside and sat at a table outside and talked. All I can tell you is that this idea of, well, you got to come to a pastor's office because it's confidential, no, not anymore. You ever sat in a coffee shop? Way too much information is being shared in these places. All I can tell you is that you've got to get out there. I coach a church planter in Atlanta, Methodist church planter, Olu Brown. And Olu Brown, his church has adopted a Dunkin' Donuts right in their area. And that is where they conduct all of their office meetings. In fact, when I go to see Olu, we walk into the restaurant, several of the employees say, "Pastor Olu, how are you this morning?" See, we sit down. Remember, one of the servers comes over and Olu says, "This guy's been coming for 2 months." See, they've been going in. When you have regular visitation, frequency is important. You just don't go once. It's regularity. And so they have meetings there. And over time, because Olu, when he first went there, he went into the Dunkin' Donuts owner and said, every week in our church, we want to hand out a $10 gift certificate to this specific Dunkin' Donuts. That's sheer genius. See, some of you are spending hundreds and thousands of dollars on brochures and flyers, and Olu spends $520 a year for that little $10 card. And every week at their church, they pass that out and they give that to somebody. Now, how do you think the owner of the Dunkin' Donuts feels? See, because when that person visits that Dunkin' Donuts, usually they got somebody with them, right? And they're spending money. And when the card runs out, they're spending more money. There's an investment that churches begin to do. And when the pastors begin to show the investment and that they're an asset to the economic raising of the community, that's when you begin to see revolution. See, my thing, when we work with existing churches, our motto is revive a church, revive a community. Because it used to be that the church used to be the heart of the community. Now, it's a castle in the community. And we need to reintroduce the church back into the community. And the only way that's going to do that is the face of the pastor getting out and putting their face on all these particular fishing ponds that are in your spot. Have I mentioned to you ministry is a contact sport? Have I mentioned that? Because I want to make sure I do that. But this is the new normal, pastors. Adopt an office. When I moved to Wingate, North Carolina, population 1,089, they had Joe's Diner. I kid you not, it was Joe's Diner. That's where everybody went. And that's where I had my office. I worked on my sermons on Saturday night at Joe's Diner. And as I worked on my sermon, these people would come in, I go, okay, now if they show up at my church tomorrow, how is what I'm going to say here going to relate to that person there? See, your sermons will take on a freshness about them. They'll take it. You won't be living in the bubble of the church and always preaching to church people. You'll be preaching to real people as time goes on. And you need to begin that. Get out into the community. Next, now I'm going to give you a long list. This is what we tell our church planters and pastors that we coach. If they're going to do that, I'm going to give you a long list. And you don't pick one, you pick several of them. Because these are things that United Methodist Church planters have done repeatedly, and we have seen all kinds of fruit. Now, Bishop, at the risk of gambling, I carry $200 with me, and I put it up here on the podium during this time because I'll put up any United Methodist Church planter and their techniques and success against anything you got in the room. And it's very lonely, but I always make that offer because church planters have got to produce fruit, not just a few people in a Bible study feeling good for the next 14 years singing Kumbaya. That's not really what we're after. We're after fruit, not frustration. So, kids' sports or whatever age-appropriate sports are. If your kids are in sports, get out there to the sports field. Now, do not coach your children. Please, do not do it. Don't do it. Don't give in to the temptation. Go for therapy. You'll get over it. See? I know you've got mommy and daddy issues of bonding with your children, but this is not the place to do it on the soccer field. You go to the manager of the team and you say, do you have a social director? What do you mean? Well, somebody to plan the preseason barbecue, the end of the year celebration, all those kinds of things. Because one of the things that we find that society looks at pastors and they say, what pastors do, that's not normal. So you have to get back to doing what normal people do on a regular basis. And normal people go to their kids' games, they don't manage, they sit on the sideline and yell and scream at the ref. Again, y'all are looking so pious. Am I the only parent that ever did that? So get out there and begin to do that. Begin to get, see these as connections as you do that. Well, you don't like sports, your kids are in music, go to the music teacher. If they're in that, go to the dance teacher. I don't really care. But see yourself as the social director, because pastors, the one thing you know how to do is create community. Why not begin to give them tastes of that as you do that? Bring your gifts and graces to the world and begin to help them do some of those kind of things, and you interact. Because they'll say, gosh, we didn't know pastors brought their kids and did normal things like this. You've got to return some normalcy back to what you're doing. Next, all-pro dads. Tremendous opportunity, pastors, for you to do ministry in your community. If you're not familiar with it, you should be. Tony Dungy, the first African-American coach to win the Super Bowl. The year before that, some of you may know that he and his wife are people of deep Christian faith. And they lost a son at 18 to suicide. And they went through some very deep valleys. And he came out at the end of that and began a mentoring group that is values-based, not Christian-based, but values-based. And it's been recognized by every public school in this country. I have a planter in Orlando, Florida. He went to the principal of his elementary school, asked if he could do it. The principal embraced him and said, great. Every month they have a breakfast for the dads, and the dads bring their son or daughter to that breakfast. It's a tremendous opportunity. It's opened up all kinds of avenues for that pastor in that community. All because he logged on to allprodad.com and had the guts to go down and talk to the principal, and rather than complain about the school, to actually begin to bring something in, to bring light and salt into the school. Walk across the street. Now, friends, you were made for this kind of stuff. Next. Oh, this is one of the church planters I coach right here. Kim is in Florida Conference. She was starting a cell-based church, and she knew nobody in her community. And so we were talking about places to network, and she said, well, I was thinking of going down to the Y. I don't know how to swim. I didn't realize this, but they actually have swimming classes for adults at the Y. So this is her in the foreground right there. She went, and 4 mornings a week at 6:30 in the morning, she went for an hour for learning how to swim. 13 people, 13, in that swimming class became part of her new cell group that became a church, all because she showed up at 6:30 to swim. Now, when she was swimming, she was not playing, was she? What was she doing? Yeah, see, it's hard for you pastors, this shows you how programmed you've become. You didn't know what the word was. The word is working. She did that, and she produced more members in her new church than any of you have done. See, because you've been reprogrammed into thinking sitting in an office is going to get people coming to your church. Aren't you jealous now, see? She's doing a great job. Next. Oops, wrong one. Pastors, most communities have a chamber of commerce. You want to go down to the Chamber of Commerce, and you want to join, and the $50 or whatever it costs you to join, your treasurer of your church is going to pay it, because you're not playing at the chamber, are you? What are you doing? You're working. And then you meet the president of the chamber and you say, do you have a chaplain? You say, well, what do you mean a chaplain? Well, somebody to pray for the food when we eat. No, we don't have a chaplain. Can I be the chaplain? Yes. Now you're the chaplain. Why is that important? Because most of the business people in your community no longer go to church. And at 2 o'clock, in the afternoon sometime, they're going to have some problem, and they say, well, there's a minister that I've interacted with at my chamber meeting. And because you walked across the street and joined the chamber, a bridge is built, and all of a sudden now you're an agent of redemption. Notice, not inside the 4 walls of your office. See, out there in the community where people are living. See, once you go out there, I'm just so anxious and jealous for you to have all these exchanges, because they're there waiting for you to happen. Same thing with the Rotary. You're going to go to the Rotary and you're going to say, do you have a chaplain? Okay, 1, 2, 3? No. 1, 2, 3? No. Do you have a chaplain? 1, 2, 3? Oh, that sucked. One more time. 1, 2, 3? That's right. And they're going to say no, and then you're going to say, can I pray on the food? Yes. And then you're going to say, can I be the chaplain? 1, 2, 3? Much better. See, now you're the chaplain. Why is this important? Because again, you're getting back into the fishing ground where all the fish are. All right. Next. Barnes & Noble. Oh. Some of you don't like sports, some of you don't like the arts, but a number of you love to read. I had a church planter. We were talking about her networking, and she says, I'm going to go down to the local Barnes & Noble. I'm going to start a book club. I hadn't thought of that, but what a great idea. So she goes down there. Now, what do you think the Barnes & Noble guy said when she comes in and says, can I start a book club? Yeah. Oh, yeah. See. You know how much money comes in when they do that? So I said, well, what's the book you're going to have? I'm thinking, some Christian book. No, she said, well, it's going to be around that vampire book. What do you call that book? Twilight. And I'm sitting there going, okay, well, all right, okay. Twilight, 43 people signed up to be part of her book club. 17 of those people today, 2 years later, are members of her new church. Now this girl, she's sheer genius. She didn't stop there. Then she started these other book clubs out of it. She's got 5 or 6 book clubs that she's running, that other people that she's recruited from the book clubs. So she'll have on these controversial topics. She'll have on a Christian, book that made some, headlines. She'll have other books. All these books, because it got her out, interacting. And the typical response, from many of the people that joined her first book club, well, we didn't know, Christians read about vampires. That's like what normal people do. See? Now you say, well, vampires isn't my cup of tea. I don't really care if it is or not. What is your cup of tea? Here's my $200 up there, 17 new people in 2 years that she got, not to mention the other people she's added, and the lives that have been transformed, all because this young lady walked across the street and said hello to the Barnes & Noble guy. See, these are just on and on and on. Oh, we could go on this. I'll give you a few more. Oh, this is one of my favorites. Let's see, this has a little spotter. All right. Now, friends, this is a church plant I coached in Denver. This gentleman right here in the baseball hat, right there. Okay? That is a United Methodist church planter that 13 years ago was appointed to start a church on the north side of Denver. He didn't know one soul. He was actually bishop from outside the conference. See, he was that alien. He goes in there, single guy. He moves into an apartment complex, and he was going to build his church based on one value, and that was serving people in Jesus' name. That was his one and only mission statement. It's always been the same. He was going to start a church based on raising up people who would go and function and serve the least, the last, the lost, the lonely, the left over, and the left out. And he was going to grow a church like that. So he goes to his apartment complex. He mimeographs this little flyer. He joins the Habitat for Humanity project, and he invites everybody in this complex to join him on his team for this Habitat project. Well, these are the people who showed up. He's leading them in prayer before they do the work. Now, none of these people were Christians. None of them had a church background. But you know what they wanted to do? They wanted to help somebody. And this gentleman gave him an opportunity to do that. And so he said, hey, let's have a prayer. Let's ask God's blessing on this family, on this home, and on our work today. Now, he didn't stop there. He had a reunion the following week at a barbecue at his place in the apartment complex. He's built a church now of over 350 people 13 years later, all because, and all these things. They do short-term mission projects. They do things like Habitat. They were down in Mississippi, Louisiana. They've been over to Haiti. They've been all over the place and putting together teams and doing this. And he's built a very sound United Methodist church, all because he walked across walk across the street. He walked across the hallway and invited his neighbors to join him in mission. See, these are the kind of things, pastors, that you can do. Many of you are involved in outreach programs and doing things. The problem is you do them alone. And you don't think about the elbow and the strategy that you could use. See, don't invite church people to go with you. Invite your neighbors, your friends, other people out there that are looking for opportunities to help. They'll do it. It will touch something in their heart to be able to help someone else. And you're going to do them a favor in that. Oh, this is another one. Community bands. Now, I know enough of you pastors to know that at one point in time, you used to have a life. And some of you play musical instruments. When I started the church in Wingate, North Carolina, population 1,089, they had a community band, volunteer. And I know that because one of the members of our church played the trombone in the Purdue Marching Band. He was an engineer, and he joined. You don't want me anywhere near music, is all I can tell you, right? But I go down, I meet the director for the band, and I say, "Do you have a chaplain?" And he says, "Well, what do you mean a chaplain?" I said, "Well, you know, somebody to lay hands on the instruments so they sound better." You know, we laughed about that. I became the chaplain of the community band. Now, why is that important in a small community? Those of you in small towns, you know, they have these little festivals, these parades, these things. And from time to time, they'd say, "Reverend Jim Griffith will give the invocation." I'd stand up and give the invocation. And I'd talk around. Then, for Christmas, see, we had a strategy. For Advent, those 4 Sundays in Advent, now I know most of you got music programs. And your worship divas get to strut their stuff. Oh yeah, they strut their stuff for Christmas. Not us. We gave most of our people the time off at Christmas. I went to the community band and say, could you play at our worship services the 4 Sundays of Advent? Now some of them had churches, others didn't. We'd have 8 or 9 people in that band every single week. Well, you say, what did they play? What do you think you play at Christmas? Even Hell's Angels want to sing Christmas carols, for crying out loud. So we had Christmas carols every week. Now see, as a church planter, I know things that you probably don't know. And I know your music people don't know this. Did you know that every time you put a new instrumentalist on the stage, a new instrumentalist on your stage, you add 3 new people, 3 new adults sitting in your congregation? Every time you add a new person to a vocalist on your stage, someone singing your choir or singing your ensemble, you add 8 new adults sitting in the congregation. Oftentimes, see, I get sideways with music directors. Oftentimes, see, they're after the sound. And you and I are after the people. See? And oftentimes, you cap the size of your church. When I work with churches, I say you need to take the choir and start a second choir or start a second singing group. Oh my gosh, you would have thought I was a red-headed dragon from the book of Revelation when I suggest this. Because they don't think like that. Not me. We added, I cannot tell you how many dozens of people we added. Because can you imagine Joe's buddies down at the bar when Joe says, "I'm playing at the church down the road"? See, that's right. I got to see this. And they'd sit in the front row. And they'd be sitting there, Joe up there playing the trumpet, having a great time. And of course, then we would descend on these people, you know, in a good way, and we would meet them. I'd follow up on them. I mean, we added dozens and dozens and dozens of families because I walked across the street and became the chaplain of the band. Now, friends, this isn't rocket science, but it does mean you got to get out of the office. All right, let's see, a couple more. This is a United Methodist pastor. He was in high school, he was a thespian in acting. And when he went to college on a scholarship, he got involved in the sound and lighting. And he says anytime he gets a new appointment, when he moves to a community, first stop is at the local volunteer theater, you know, and a community theater. And he helps with the sound and the lighting and everything else. This guy's a genius. He comes and he has these drama people come and reenact Bible scenes on the stage. Now, these are people, men and women, that do not know the name of Christ for the most part. He brings them in and they interact. He has his liturgy. He has one of them teach his liturgists how to read. Amen. The most frustrating thing I see, you know, when I go to churches, is you get some liturgist up there and you can tell what happened. They were coming in on Sunday. Joe, here, you need to read this morning. Don't call that worship, friends. Don't call it worship. It's insulting to God. So he brings them in and teaches them how to read with emotion, how to pause. Liturgical reading is very different than just monotone. We've got to bring some life back into our worship services, and you don't do that without training your people. So this is the kind of thing that he does. Now, again, if you're trying to reach into the gay, lesbian community, this is a major gateway. Major gateway. And yet I find most churches, you know, they got this little thing and they don't do anything else. You've got to get out there. Friends, there's people everywhere if you're going to reach them. And one of the things that you find is, you know, as I've worked with gay and lesbians in terms of churches, they don't want to be in a gay and lesbian church. They want to be in a normal church because they want us to be seen as normal, not as marginalized. And if you just kind of treat them out there, that's a whole different deal. We have to make sure that we are embracing all of God's children, and you better have a strategy for it other than picketing the local whatever place that's against them. That does not get them on your side. This gets them in your church. It gets every particular pond that you're looking at, and you got to have a strategy for each one. Next, police department. People ask me, what did I do? How do you chew up 8 hours a week? Once a month. Every time I started church, my second stop was at the local precinct, where I became a ride-along chaplain with the police department. See, most of the time the police see the clergy as in bad things. And I will tell you that police officers, if you're going to reach them, it's a closed community. You've got to embed yourself in that community. I would go down, and 8 hours a month, one day a month for 8 hours, I would sit down next to a police officer and ride around in the car. If you want to know your community, ride with a police officer and see what they see and hear what they hear. My first question to a police officer would be, how'd you get into law enforcement? And they would share their story. And then what do you think they asked me? How'd you get into ministry? And then I would begin to share my story, and I would have a conversation with them. I would go in early. The day that I would ride along, I would go in a couple hours early. They have great fitness centers. I'd go in and I would work out with a number of the men and women there. And I will never forget the first time this happened to me, and it's what we live for, pastors. I was sitting, I'd been pumping some weights, and I was tired, and I was sitting there on a bench, and one of the officers sat down right next to me, and he said the three greatest words a pastor just longs to hear. Got a minute? And in that crowded room, this officer began to share a deep part of his heart. And there was a redemptive moment right then. I just felt like it was the two of us in that whole room. Now, friends, this is what you and I were made for. These kind of interactions. It's not going to happen in your office, I can assure you. But it will happen as you begin to take the steps necessary to get out into the community and begin to interact. Please, for God's sake, get out into the mission field. Begin to be the kind of redemptive person that your gifts and graces have equipped you to do. It's not going to happen sitting in an office. Well, I could talk till midnight about these stories. I want to be respectful of the time. I want to thank you for having me. And I want to wish you all God's best as you get out of the office and get back into that mission field and reclaiming the kingdom of God for Jesus Christ. Can I get a witness to that? Amen.